Hi everyone, it's Talia from Zart Art, and today we're going to be creating a watercolour pattern exploration. Okay, so here's a bit of an example of what we'll be creating today using a few simple materials, and our work today is going to be inspired by Patricia Braune. So Patricia Braune is known for her bold colours, her repeating lines, and creating a sense of movement in her work. So we're going to be basing some of our designs and our pattern exploration off of her pieces, which are inspired by the natural world. So to begin, we are going to start with some watercolour paper. Now you can work at whatever size you choose. I'm going to be working at A3. You probably don't want to go any smaller than A4, but this work can be done at quite a large scale as well and look quite nice. So to begin, we're going to frame up our work using some washi tape. So washi tape is a tape that has a mild adhesive in it, so it's easy to remove from paper. So find the end of your washi tape, which can be the hardest part of this task, and gently peel it off just so it comes off evenly. And we're just going to begin by creating a border for our piece of paper. So the reason why we're using washi tape is because something that has a more adhesive quality to it, like a masking tape or a sticky tape, can tear the paper when we remove this later. So we want to use washi tape because it's nice and light and won't tear the paper when we remove it later. So now that I've got my washi tape frame just around the border, what we're going to do now is use some more washi tape inside our paper to create some of those shapes. So you can do triangles, squares, a combination of the two if you feel like it, but we just want to make sure that our edges are straight. So you can overlap your washi tape a little bit to make sure that you've got those straight lines, and you can use scissors to cut your washi tape or you can tear it. But as long as we've got a few shapes running throughout the center of our piece, then that will work. So I think I'll work with a variety of different shapes for this and just lay out my washi tape in a few different directions. Okay, so now I've got my piece of paper framed up. Next, we're going to use some watercolor paints. So we're going to create colors in between these taped up sections. So you can choose to use the same color throughout, or you can try and blend a few different colors. Because we are working with these palettes of watercolor, I'm going to try and blend a few colors together, and I'm going to do a wet on wet technique for this process. So wet on wet means we are going to wet the surface where we are painting with a bit of water, which is why it's a good idea to use watercolor paper, because using normal paper will make this warp and can tear up and peel the paper. But with watercolor paper, it should absorb that moisture easily. And getting a bit of color onto your brush. I have pre-moistened these watercolors just so the color picks up a bit easier. If you are working on a palette which is completely dry, you might want to get some water on top of it and just put your brush into the palette a few times to pick up enough color. Now I'm using a few different tones of blue just so I can blend them into that one section, and then we get a really nice blended effect in our work. So what I'm going to do is play with a few different colors and different tones in each. like with our picture, and our watercolor paint has dried, and you do want it to dry completely before working over the top. So again, we'll have a look at my example, and there is a few options here. So you can use different colored pens if you want to. You can use black pens, white pens. So just hold that up close because the white pen is a little bit harder to see. But these are the pens that I used for that first example. I'm only going to stick to the black fine pen and the black broad pen for this project, just so you can see what I'm drawing with the cameras. It's a little bit easier than seeing me drawing with the white markers. So for our patterns, we're going to be focusing on those repeating lines and shapes to create that sense of movement. And we're also going to be drawing inspiration from nature. So think about the lines and shapes you can see in nature, from the trees, the flowers, even grass, and those repeating lines that you can see in the environment. So what you might want to do is have a draft piece of paper to draw some designs onto, which will help you figure out what you're doing in your final piece. Because I'm going to be working directly with my black pen onto the paper, you want to be sure of what you're making. So I'm going to stick to some of the patterns and designs that I've used in my first piece so that I know what I'm drawing in this piece. So if you don't already have a sample piece to work from, then I'd recommend drawing some examples on a spare piece of paper so you get a better idea of what your final shapes for your finished artwork will look like. So in each section, I'm going to stick to a particular pattern. So for this first section, I'm going to stick to some repeating flower designs and then move on to another section and change up my design a little bit. So I'll be using my fine marker to start off with, and I might incorporate some of the broad marker in there as well to really emphasize some of those shapes.
Do you suppose I could have a few words with Patricia? Nobody wants to do this job because you got too much feeling. Do you suppose I could have a few words with Mr. Benson? Nobody wants to do this job because you got too much feeling. Do you suppose I could have a few words with Mr. Benson?
Okay, so now I've finished drawing in my patterns. We're going to remove our tape. What you can do is leave your tape on and trim off the edges if you like that border in your work, but I'll show you what it looks like when we do remove the tape. So pick an edge of your washi tape and just gently remove it so the tape will be overlapping with other areas. So just make sure you can pull off one piece and just gently remove that. So you shouldn't have any paper coming off with the tape. If you do, just gently put the tape back on and try and remove it from the other direction. Because the paper has a grain to it, you might find that depending on the direction of your tape and where you're pulling, it might easily pull off some of that paper. But the washi tape is quite light, so you shouldn't have too much of a problem with removing that. So all I'm going to do is remove the tape, and we'll get that nice crisp edge where our watercolor hasn't seeped under the paper, which will create a really nice border to our different sections.
Do you suppose I could have a few words with Mr. Benson? Nobody wants to do this job because you got too much feeling.
Okay, so now we've taken off our tape, so you can see we've got our borders where the tape has resisted the watercolor. So we've got a nice positive and negative space happening here, and there's emphasis created in those patterns and the colored areas, so your eye is drawn to a different section of the pattern that's created in this piece. But otherwise, that's the end of this lesson. I hope you've had fun and you can explore various colors, various areas of inspiration from your garden, from the beach, or you can find other sources to create some of these patterns. But I hope you enjoyed this video and I look forward to seeing you next time.